The resilient consumer is one of the big factors that has helped the economy avoid a recession. So far this earnings season, key retailers, though, have cautioned about weakening sales trends, inflation still being a problem, and pickier customers. Well, investors, we are going to get a closer look at some of these spending trends next week with Lowe's, Urban Outfitters, TJX Companies, and Best Buy all scheduled to report. Let's talk about what we could expect with Simeon Siegel. He's BMO Capital Markets Managing Director. Simeon, it's good to see you here. So when we think about the companies that have reported so far, there has been a trend of consumers once again trading down. They are clearly being hit by the fact that inflation has proven to be even stickier than many forecasters had anticipated up until this point. What does that mean for some of these retailers that are set to report next week?
Hey, Shauna, great to see you. By the way, you reminded me how busy and painful next week is going to be. Thank you.
So just a friendly reminder ahead of the weekend.
Right. It's a great Friday reminder. That's great. So I think what is very interesting right now is there's an incredible amount of nuance at the company level. And in theory, that's a very encouraging thing if you're a stock picker. The problem is we can look at the market and we can see what happened yesterday as an example. And there is so much of the stock trading dynamic, which is just market driven right now. And so I'm looking at some of these businesses and saying, you know what, for the first time since the pandemic, companies actually have to execute well. You're watching certain companies drive revenues up, certain ones drive revenues down. You're watching certain companies see material gross margin expansion, others a lot less so. And so that's really comforting. The problem is right now, all my stocks are up. And so when I look across the board, it's going to be very interesting next week seeing what matters, what people want to focus on. And I think that's your question. And so what I'm going to keep an eye on is the fact that so far, my companies on average have seen revenues grow mid-single digits, but they've seen gross margins expand by 200 basis points. There's still this benefit from supply chain. And so this is a very important quality of earnings story to keep in mind.
How would you describe the consumer amid this earnings season as well, Simeon? I mean, when you think about where the consumer is still willing to buy in at full prices versus where they're looking for deals and looking for value hacks.
Yeah, it's such an important question because we're all hearing the consumer. Listen, it sounds pretty scary. So if the question is whether consumer's healthy or not, I don't know. If the question is whether the consumer is spending or not, well, the revenues are saying they are. And so I know there's this perception that because of inflation on staple items, people aren't buying discretionary, but I'm not seeing that in the results. We are seeing revenues grow. And so I think that's this really fascinating conversation as we look. Listen, we'll see TJX give us a very good snapshot on people that are specifically looking for value. But then we'll see Birkenstock, on the other hand, where people are buying, perhaps paying more comfortable spending up. So I think it's much more of a company specific. I think you give a consumer something that they want to spend on and they're willing to spend on it. Whether that's healthy or not, that's a different conversation.
Simeon, what does the promotional environment look like right now in terms of the channel checks that you've been seeing? And do you expect that trend that we did see play out over the holidays? Is that something that's going to remain intact in 2024?
Yeah, I think that the holiday trend probably will, because the holiday trend showed certain companies promoting and certain ones not. And I think that's a really interesting example. Like Bath & Body Works is going to report next week. I'm hoping that what they tell us is that they pull back on promotions because they believe that they can drive a full price sell-through. That's a scented candle. It's not a big ticket item, but it's an item where people feel very passionate about and they're willing to spend. It's clearly it's more discretionary than it is staple, although maybe some people would disagree. And so we've definitely been seeing promotions. We've been seeing the companies that need to drive demand resort to pulling that price lever. But we've also been seeing plenty that are not talk about prices that are growing. And so I think that's what you want to see. If you're a retailer, if you're an operator, you want to know that the consumer is going to give you credit for items that they believe that you think have value there, and you do not need to drive promotions. But as we saw since 2008, the companies that don't have that, they go immediately to promotions. During the pandemic, we didn't see them. We definitely are seeing them now.
Simeon, Elf stock up 30% year to date. Ulta, a company that you cover, their stock is up by about 13% year to date as well. How much more legs did this little luxuries trade have from your purview?
You know what's fascinating? The fact that 12% year to date is an underperformer in my group right now. Like, I think that right before this, you were talking about rate cuts. In December, when we had conversations about rates coming down, the sector went through the roof. And so it's an interesting conversation. If you would have said Ulta is where it is right now 3 months ago, I think most people would have said that's overvalued. The fact is, when the market multiple goes up, we have to follow the individual stocks as well. And so Ulta right now is putting up good numbers. I think if you're putting up good numbers, people are going to allow your stock to go higher. If they were to look and say, okay, let me think about an intrinsic value of a multiple that I would have wanted to pay outside of what's been going on in the market, that would be a different story, but we don't operate outside of the market. And so I think when I look at that, and Ulta, you look at a company that is driving good results. Again, Bath and Body Works, tangential to that sector. You look at companies that are going to be driving good results, and if the gross margin holds, I don't think anyone's going to be selling these stocks.
Simeon, while we have you, I got to ask you, because I've been getting a roundup from some of the analysts that cover this company, Lululemon, and this men's sneaker launch. Look, I've been fascinated and really waiting for any type of results to see what the success of this launch was like. However, I can't even go in stores and get them. I'm talking to some of the associates. They're saying that I got to go online. They said after the company said that they were supposed to be in store, they're not in store. They had to ship it back. What is going on with this launch from what you know? I know you guys do far more channel checks than I do, even though I go like 2 or 3 times a week.
I was going to say, the pains of a sneakerhead here. Listen, I think that what Lulu has done so well is continue to drive the brand, continue to drive the core. The initiatives, the new product lines over the last several years, other than the belt bag in terms of what we've seen, maybe have been a little bit less so. So whether they're pitching it to you as Nike's scarcity value, I think these are not viewed as limited drops. I think these are things that you should, when they are finally rolled out en masse, you should be able to get them when you walk in the store. I don't think they're meant to drive this perception of there's just a limited amount. But I think the question ultimately for Lulu is whether people are still buying that core, whether it's your yoga pant or whether it's your ABC pant. That's what they need to drive, because at the end of the day, the valuation here is much larger. And so I think what I've been seeing, I think there's concerns right now that those trends have been coming down, and you can see that. I told you every stock in my group is up a lot. Lulu's not. And so I think right now there are concerns that all those channel checks, sneakers aside, are asking about where's the core Lulu business, because that stock has run fantastically until this year.
Simeon, Siegel, always a pleasure to get some of your insights. Thanks so much for taking the time here today. We know it's a busy week for you next week, but enjoy the weekend for sure.
Good to see you guys. Have a good weekend.